J'ouvre maintenant la séance. Welcome to meeting number 124 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on the Status of Women. I would like to remind all members of the following points. Please wait until I recognize your name before speaking. And a reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Merci à tous pour votre coopération.
Thank you to all for your cooperation.
Thank you, everyone.
2, and the motions adopted by the committee on Tuesday, June 4th, 2024, and Wednesday, September 25th, 2024, the committee will commence its study of breast cancer screening. Before I begin, I would like to ask all in-person participants to read the guidelines written on the updated cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidences and to prevent the health and safety of all participants, including the interpreters. At this point, I would like to welcome our witnesses. We have appearing as an individual, Cheryl White. Appearing by video conference that we're just trying to get set up here and connected is Dr. Jean Seely, Professor of Radiology, Faculty of Medicine, University of Ottawa. And also Kimberly Wahama Deschan, founder of Trust Your Bust. From Dense Breast Canada, we have Carolyn Holland. And also joining us by video conference, which we're just trying to coordinate that as well, we have Jenny Dale, co-founder and executive director. At this point, we will begin with our opening statements. Ms. White, you will have the floor for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. As a patient who has been negatively impacted by difficulty accessing mammograms in Canada due to task force guidelines, I would like to thank this committee for inviting me to speak today. Excuse me. There are many women who have found themselves in similar circumstances who will feel seen and heard. Excuse me. Through treatment, I heard many stories of fellow patients, friends, and families with this experience of delayed diagnosis.
Ms. White, take all the time. You're good.
Thank you. Many Canadians have lost a young woman in their life. Excuse me. When I was 39, my doctor told me that she had been reading and that since screening at 40 was a shared decision, she's wanted me to start thinking about it. She suggested that a benchmark at 40 would help us watch for changes and be proactive. I agreed. That sounded very wise. Unfortunately, within the year, she suddenly retired and closed her practice. It took me some time, but eventually I found a young doctor accepting new patients. One of my first requests was for a screening mammogram. She refused, explaining that it was not recommended. I insisted, but again, she refused. I would ask again the following year, but again, no. I knew I couldn't get a second opinion, as I was asked to sign a contract that I would not use walk-in clinics. I knew if my doctor removed me from her roster, I would be unable to find another due to the doctor shortage. And then I found a lump. At first, I dismissed it. I felt that since she had been so firm on not authorizing a mammogram, that the appointment would be challenging. Eventually, I did go, and 2 weeks after my 43rd birthday, I was diagnosed with a locally advanced cancer with lymph node involvement. My family doctor called me between appointments. She was crying on the phone, but I didn't have the time or energy to comfort her. I think the guidelines cause harm to the doctors who follow them too. Sure, the biopsy scans and all of the processes of diagnosis were stressful, but so was trying to advocate for my care from my doctor in the first place. I wonder what if my first doctor hadn't retired, or if I'd taken the chance and gone to a walk-in clinic to ask for a requisition. There is a power imbalance between doctors and patients, which makes shared decision-making impractical unless patients can access screening without their doctor's permission. It is essential that women in their 40s across Canada be allowed to self-refer. If I had been able to self-refer, my cancer may have been caught earlier. The consequences of delayed diagnosis for me may not end my life prematurely. However, the treatment effects are awful, and my quality of life has been impacted. The chemotherapy may have damaged my heart and other organs. I needed surgery to remove the tumor and affected lymph nodes, 29 consecutive days of radiation, and a full year of targeted therapy infusions. I am currently in my 5th year of hormone treatment, which causes achy joints, mood changes, brain fog, and other unpleasant side effects. I am lucky. I may live to old age. I may even live to the rest of my life without a breast cancer reoccurrence. When I was undergoing chemotherapy, I read the Pulitzer Prize-winning book, The Emperor of All Maladies, and there are 4 pages on the Canadian breast screening randomized controlled trial from 1980s. I was so saddened to learn that it is widely known that the study was sloppy or maybe even fraudulent, that people involved explained the problems with randomizing patients, and still there is no indication that scientists, the University of Toronto, or the journal CMAJ, where the study was published, are planning to retract the RCT. I hope my story helps the committee in your important work. It is so reassuring that people in your position care about the health and lives of women like me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. White. You're in a safe spot here. Thank you for sharing. At this point, I would like to welcome Dr. Seeley. You have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, dear committee members, for the opportunity to testify today on this critical issue. I am a breast imaging specialist at the Ottawa Hospital, where I diagnose women at every stage of breast cancer, and early detection is the key. Screening detects cancers at stage 0 and 1, while cancers detected once symptoms appear are often advanced, stage 2, 3, or even 4, requiring aggressive, life-altering treatments. 17% of breast cancers occur in women in their 40s. These are often aggressive, fueled by ovarian hormones. There is minimal overdiagnosis in this age group. Without screening, these cancers will continue to grow unchecked. Breast cancer is the leading cause of death for Canadian women ages 40 to 55. I was invited as an expert to work with the Ottawa panel reviewing the evidence for the breast screening guideline update. What I witnessed was deeply concerning. The task force ignored recent, robust evidence that supports lowering the age for screening to 40, evidence that the U.S. task force and numerous other countries have already embraced. I've had the privilege of collaborating with Statistics Canada and other Canadian researchers on multiple studies. The research is clear and points to the same conclusion: the age for screening in Canada must be lowered. Our research with Stats Canada showed a dramatic increase in breast cancer incidence over the past 35 years, with a significant 9.1% rise in women in their 40s. Last month, we published a study, again with Stats Canada, highlighting that younger women, particularly those aged 40 to 45, are more likely to be developed with aggressive breast cancer subtypes. These cancers, like triple-negative breast cancer, have a poorer prognosis when detected late, with only 47% of women surviving 5 years after being diagnosed with stage 3 disease. But our study also revealed hope. Early detection can play a pivotal role in improving survival outcomes. Across all subtypes, when cancer is detected at stage 1, the 5-year survival rate is greater than 96%. So any argument that stage doesn't matter because we have good treatments today is very misleading. In Canada, the 5-year survival rate for stage 1 breast cancer is nearly 100%, but it plummets to a devastating 23% when the disease is stage 4. In another study, we analyzed provinces with screening programs for women in their 40s, like Yukon, PEI, Nova Scotia, and British Columbia, and found a significant reduction in stage 4 cancers in the 40s, simply by living in a province that screened women at 40. Women in these provinces are diagnosed at earlier stages, saving lives and reducing suffering. This applies not only to women in their 40s, but also to women in their 50s, whose cancers are caught earlier thanks to screening in their 40s. Another of our studies showed screening in the 40s was associated with a marked improvement in 10-year net survival and reduction in breast cancer mortality. This isn't just about saving lives, it's also about reducing the massive financial burden of treating advanced cancer. And in 2023, we published research showing that in Canada, the cost of treating a stage 1 breast cancer diagnosis is under $40,000. But for stage 4, that cost skyrockets to an average of $370,000 due to expensive treatments like chemotherapy and immunotherapy. In addition, we looked at cost effectiveness in Canada. We found that screening women every 2 years from age 40 to 74 is not only life-saving, but also cost-effective compared to screening ages 50 to 74. And screening every year is even more cost-effective, saving $31,000 per death averted and $1,889 per life year saved. It's estimated to save over 417 million Canadian dollars every year, which is a huge benefit in terms of cost effectiveness. One of the things that some people fear is that increased screening will increase the number of cancers and therefore increase the costs. But our research found the opposite. Comparing provinces that screen women in their 40s to those that don't, we found no increase in breast cancer incidence. Because if you don't screen in the 40s, the cancers don't disappear. They keep growing and are eventually diagnosed at later, more dangerous stages. Lastly, I'd like to emphasize the profound disparities that exist in breast cancer diagnosis across race and ethnicity in Canada. In our study with Statistics Canada that was recently accepted for publication, we found that while the peak age of diagnosis for white women is in their 60s, non-white women are far more likely to be diagnosed in their 40s. We found that 41% of cancers in non-white women are diagnosed before age 50, compared to just 16% for white women. And Black women are 1.4 times more likely to die from breast cancer. These women often develop aggressive subtypes of the disease, but even these aggressive cancers can be treated effectively when caught early. So screening at age 40 isn't just a matter of science, it's a matter of equity. We cannot allow outdated guidelines to persist when the evidence is clear, overwhelming, and urgent. We must demand that our health policies reflect the latest scientific evidence and best practices. We must act now in Canada. Many lives depend on it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sealy. Next, I would welcome Ms. Wahama Deshan. You have up to 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. Bonjour, Annie. Honorable Madam Chair, Vice Chairs, committee members, fellow witnesses, and guests. My name is Kimberly Wahama Deshain, and I'm from Sudbury, Ontario. I'm here today not only as a witness in the study of breast cancer screening for women aged 40 and over, but I'm a breast cancer survivor. I was diagnosed at the age of 47 when mammograms were recommended 50 plus. On April Fool's Day 2013, I found a lump the size of a ping pong ball on my left breast. No joke. In May, I had a biopsy. In June, I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. In July, I had a lumpectomy. Starting in October to December, I received 4 chemotherapies. My hair started falling out 12 days after my first chemo. I literally pulled the rest of my hair out and shaved the rest. I started my radiation therapy in January 2014 and finished 30 radiations by the end of February. So 11 years ago, with 11 months of treatment, under the age of 50, with no family history of breast cancer, my life changed forever. I asked myself, will I survive this diagnosis? What can I do? Firstly, I purchased my family tombstone and plot and put my name on it with a cancer ribbon, because who knows? I worked through my treatments. Even I was an events manager and I couldn't afford not to, and I had events to run. I created a Trust Your Bus fund through the Northeast Cancer Center and raised over $18,000 by producing awareness events such as a high tea, a Halloween party, a pink labeled beer, and a skate with my pink wig with my Trust Your Bus jersey at a Sudbury Wolves game, to name a few. Funds went to breast cancer research, awareness, and families in need. I did some local research and found that many women in my community had developed breast cancer under the age of 50. I invited 12 women and 1 man, as 1% of men will develop breast cancer, and I wanted them to share their story in my calendar of hope. I had sent a copy of my calendar to the Minister of Health at the time, the Honourable Deb Matthews, asking why mammograms were given at the age of 50. With no response, I continued my advocacy, and through my Trust Your Bus fund, I helped a young woman who was diagnosed with breast cancer on her 27th birthday, Janica Fay. She started a journal titled Fight to 28. She reached her 28th birthday, but later passed away, leaving 3 young girls, a husband, her parents, and siblings behind. She died at the age of 28, not 40, not 50. I can't imagine losing a child at the age of 28. When my son turned 28 2 years ago, I thought about us and Janica and her family. I presented my raw story as a survivor to high school students, women's groups, and was asked to present at Nossum University to first and second year learners. My presentation is now part of the Nossum U curriculum for the first time from a patient perspective. The students came up to me crying and thanking me for my story of the good, the bad, and the ugly, so that they could be more prepared as they become doctors. We've come a long way in education, research, treatment, and screening for breast cancer. Early detection is key, and many women with dense breasts avoid mammograms. So companies like Radialis in Thunder Bay have developed a non-invasive PET screening process for breast cancer patients. And RNA Diagnostics in Sudbury has developed a technology that will lighten the treatments of breast cancer. Imagine if I only had to have 2 chemos instead of 4. The harsh impact of side effects would have been minimal. Had I not trusted my bust at the age of 47, I may not be here today. I celebrated my 59th birthday last week. So my question to all of you, why should there be a minimum age barrier of mammogram testing? Wouldn't more lives be saved if the test was made available to people regardless of age? What if the focus instead was providing more education to increase awareness, self-examinations, in early testing? In my courage, strength, and hope, I believe that removing the age barrier from mammogram testing and breast screening would result in early detection, thus more lives would be saved. Thank you, merci, miigwech.
From Trust Your Bust, Kimberly, thank you very much for joining and sharing your story today. I would like to invite Ms. Holland along with Ms. Dale for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. My name is Carolyn Holland, and I'm here today not just as a 46-year-old breast cancer patient, but as a mother, wife, sister, daughter, colleague, and friend. As a volunteer with Dense Breast Canada advocating for earlier screening, I'm thrilled that Ontario lowered the age to 40 yesterday. Unlike the Canadian Task Force on Preventive Healthcare, Ontario listened to experts and followed current evidence. I'm excited for women to have the opportunity to detect cancer early and avoid the lifelong repercussions I face from not having had the chance. My doctor never raised the topic of screening in my 40s, and by the time I discovered a lump at the age of 43, the cancer had already spread to my lymph nodes. My life has been forever changed by these dangerously outdated guidelines. The 2024 guidelines are similar to those my family doctor followed 3 years ago. I am concerned that recent gains from more provinces adopting self-referral at 40 will be undermined by the ongoing influence of misinformation from the task force, which may dissuade women from screening. Task force representatives insist that women discuss the so-called harms and the benefits of mammograms with their doctors before booking. Informed decision-making requires accurate information, yet doctors are not being instructed to tell women the truth, that cancers in the 40s are often more aggressive, with the highest years of life lost to women diagnosed in the 40s. Instead, doctors are instructed to say that the risk of breast cancer is low in this age group and that screening is less beneficial than for older women. They share the task force's exaggerated harms of false positives, which are really just callbacks for more images, and they flag theoretical overdiagnosis, a risk that is minimal for women in their 40s. Doctors also rely on the task force's 1,000-person tool, but its flawed, one-size-fits-all approach ignores personal risk factors like ethnicity, family history, and breast density. The only benefit this tool considers is the decreased risk of dying of breast cancer, but not the years of life gained or the benefits of avoiding mastectomy and chemotherapy. It presents women with a limited view of the benefits of screening over the next 10 years instead of much greater lifetime benefits. This messaging misguides doctors and patients and denies women the full picture they deserve to make a truly informed decision. As long as the task force guidelines remain unchanged, Canadian women will continue to receive misleading information that downplays the life-saving benefits of early detection. Thank you.
This misinformation campaign extends beyond doctors' offices to the way the task force frames its methods, communicates in public forums, and dismisses legitimate concerns. The task force misled the public by claiming that experts were meaningfully included in the guideline update process. However, expert advisors revealed that their input was often dismissed, with the task force dictating which evidence to consider, including outdated trials from 40 to 60 years ago that don't reflect current technology or treatment advancements. These experts were excluded from voting on the guidelines. The task force cast a doubt on the integrity of these experts in the media by suggesting they have conflicts of interest. The task force claimed only its members are neutral. In reality, even before the evidence review began, the task force co-chair stated to the media that the guideline against screening in the 40s did not need to change. This resulted in a predetermined outcome orchestrated by a panel with a troubling anti-screening bias. PHAC refused to remove the co-chair despite repeated evidence of her lack of objectivity. The task force would have Canadians believe that early cancer detection is unimportant because we have effective treatments. In reality, the stage of diagnosis is critical to survival, regardless of treatment advancements. Data from Statistics Canada contradicts the task force claims. When aggressive triple-negative cancer is detected at stage 1, the 5-year survival rate is 96%, but at stage 4, it plummets to 7%. Early detection is life-saving. The task force misleads Canadians by claiming it included current evidence in its update. In reality, its grading system undervalues current observational studies, as well as studies which highlight critical trends like the rising incidence of breast cancer in younger women and the racial disparities. The U.S. task force recognized the credibility of this evidence and lowered the screening age to 40. Although our task force acknowledged many ethnic groups face earlier onset and higher mortality rates from breast cancer, it chose to leave the guidelines unchanged and discriminatory, calling for more research while ignoring the existing data that demands immediate action. Our examples today show how the task force misleads the public and healthcare professionals, operating without accountability, ethical oversight, and scientific integrity. The evidence for screening at 40 is irrefutable. Current guidelines must be suspended and revised to reflect modern, inclusive evidence. We must act now to stop avoidable late-stage breast cancer diagnoses and the needless loss of life. Of Canadians, thank you for the honor of testifying to you today, and thank you for all the work that you're doing for the well-being of Canadians.
Thank you to all witnesses for your testimony and your remarks. At this point, we will move to rounds of questions from the members. I would also like to acknowledge to the members that Dr. Seeley does need to sign off at 5:30, so you can just keep this in mind when you are posing your questions. I'd like to start with Michelle for 6 minutes.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you to our witnesses. Powerful testimony today. It's obviously emotional too. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, so it's fitting, obviously, that in the status of women, we would be delving into this. So I just want to say thank you for being here. Cheryl, if I can call you Cheryl, your testimony obviously was emotional and powerful of your experience, and I think pretty much anyone who's been through the medical system, regardless of breast cancer, you know, trying to advocate for something when they know something's not right with their body can really resonate with what you spoke of today. How old were you when you first started advocating to get breast screening?
So my previous physician was talking to me about it when I was in my late 30s. So I'm not sure. It was probably 38 or 39, and then she retired shortly after, and then I found a new doctor. So it was probably at 40, maybe 41, that I was asking for that, and it was because my prior physician had encouraged me to do so. She'd been doing some reading, and she said, I think you do need to be screened at 40. So yeah, it was around 40, and then I was diagnosed 2 weeks after my 43rd birthday.
I think, you know, I just feel like there's such a bigger conversation that you've brought up. And I mean, obviously we're talking about breast cancer, and the stats that was dropped here today, that breast cancer is the leading cause of death in women ages 40 to 55 is pretty shocking. But what's left out of that stat is the amount of women and families and children who are negatively impacted, not just by the death, but by the sickness in itself and the disease in itself. That is also a statistic that I think we should be considering. But the bigger picture that I feel that you have dropped in this committee that needs serious evaluation is the words you said, power and balance. And, you know, I think a lot of us sitting around this table have maybe aging parents, or we've seen this, and if you do not advocate and fight, you don't get anything. And we don't have enough doctors. So there's this massive imbalance because you're afraid, I'll take whatever I can get. And you have really brought to light here your testimony is very powerful. And I guess the answer that I hear from you, and I guess what I'd like to see you put in the report that we're going to do, is this concept of self-referral. This is your body. So I'd love you to expand on how you feel about that.
I don't understand why we can't. I mean, people talk about harms of mammograms, but the only harm I can think of is the $75 cost of getting one. Being told that you might have cancer and that you need a biopsy, it's terrible, but it's much worse to miss that. And I don't understand why, and lots of people that I know have heard my story, and they've self-advocated and they've struggled. They've had a hard time getting a mammogram because their doctors have told them no also. So I just don't understand why Canadian women can't access the care that they need, which is a mammogram at 40 or even younger.
I agree with you. And if I could, you hit the nail on the head. What I think is one of the underlying causes, and I think they're hiding behind, you know, you said it's the $75 cost, and they want to hide behind science, and I think it's numbers. Like, I'm wondering if anyone on this committee, and I guess I would point to Dr. Seeley being a doctor, is cost an issue? Is that thrown in at you that, okay, we can't do these screenings, we can't do this because it's going to cost the system too much money? Is that ever brought up?
Thanks for the great question. This is not directly brought up, but it's always an underlying concern that the cost of screening outweigh the benefits. In fact, we showed with a cost effectiveness study that it is going to save over $400 million per year if we do screen women, because we're shifting the cost away from treating breast cancer at advanced stages to being able to diagnose more women at early stage breast cancer. But this is something that there's still a great deal of resistance about understanding this, and we have to really emphasize that those costs that we've estimated for cost effectiveness underestimate the cost of these advanced stage breast cancers.
Dr. Seeley, not to interrupt you, but I only have 30 seconds left. Underestimate is being kind. You're not accounting for the lost work. You're not accounting for the I don't even know how you would do a cost analysis. That's I guess I'm looking at you guys shaking your heads to say that this is the cost outweighs that's bonkers to me. It doesn't make any sense. So I'd love to see more pushback and some economics and stats come forward on the lost revenue and work production and all of the things that you have to do, traveling to these doctor's appointments and parking tickets and hotels and all of these other things that are accumulated when you are dealing with sickness. We don't have a healthcare system. We have a sick care system. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Next, I would welcome Emanuela. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for being here today to share your stories with us. And I know that it takes a lot of courage to do so, because these are really difficult topics and have affected your life in a very negative way. And we appreciate learning from your experiences here today. So I guess my first question, anybody who has the answer can answer it, would be the task force claims that there's not enough Canadian evidence in order to make changes. What would you recommend that the government can do, the federal government? In what ways can the federal government help that situation to change so that there is enough evidence going forward?
If I can politely state that there is overwhelming evidence, there is absolutely no need for further study. And the claims that the task force make that there is insufficient evidence flies in the face of all of the incredibly strong evidence that is reason why the US has changed and lowered their screening age to 40, why many Asian countries, European countries start at age 40. So to delay changing these guidelines for a claimed lack of evidence is simply a tactic to avoid facing the reality of what exists. So I would strongly urge the committee not to look at doing any further research when there is so much evidence to support making this change.
Okay, thank you. And I agree with you that, there is evidence out there, and that's why the U.S. made those changes, but clearly they are pointing to something. And we spoke a lot about how different communities are affected in different ways, how certain communities peak at age 40 while white women peak at age 60. So does Canada have research studies that have been done on that?
We just had our paper accepted for publication. We actually, this was shared with PHAC and with the task force, so they are aware of it. But what this data shows, what this research shows in over 117,000 women diagnosed with breast cancer in Canada, that Black women, Asian women, non-white women have their peak incidence of breast cancer under age 50 in a majority of women. And they are more likely to be diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer under the age of 50 than white women. So the same ethnicity and race genetic factors that are at play that are shown in the US are the same ones that we're seeing in Canada. And this also affects Indigenous women. So we have very strong evidence that this is the same issue. And again, this is why such an equity issue is at play in Canada. And by not lowering the screening age, we discriminate against these women and prevent them from being diagnosed at an early stage.
Thank you. Now, when it comes to dense breasts, we know that sometimes mammograms are not necessarily the best test to do for women who have dense breasts. What would the doctors or the members of the Dense Breast Canada organization recommend to our committee regarding women with dense breasts?
Maybe I can start and then turn it over to Jenny Dale. So, dense breast absolutely is an issue. For us, it means that our mammograms are not as effective at diagnosing breast cancer. And we know that about overall 40% of women have dense breast, and under the age of 50, about 50% of women have dense breast. That means that 50% of women have non-dense breast, and the mammogram works beautifully in those women. For those women with dense breast, we would recommend additional screening. You have to start with a mammogram because it's the only way we've shown that it reduces breast cancer mortality, but we need to add other screening tests, and very strong evidence exists to add both either a breast MRI every 2 years or a breast ultrasound every year. And that's the best way to be able to identify early stage breast cancer. I'll let Dr. Jenny Dale add to that.
Thanks, Dr. Seeley. Yes, we do have the technology in Canada to detect additional cancers in dense breast, but we are not using it. Only Alberta uses 3D mammography for screening. It uses about half the clinics that it has there. We have the MRI, we have the ultrasound, but women across the country have such difficulty accessing even an ultrasound. In many provinces, they're flat out refused. And, you know, it's inequity across the country. We don't have the same chance to find cancer early. It's dependent on where you live. So we really would like to see the use of more of the technology that we do have to help find cancer early. And I would like to add that one of the reasons that the provinces are not offering supplemental screening for women with dense breasts is the task force. The task force recommends against supplemental screening, and the task force did not do its own evidence review on dense breasts. It just followed what the US said, and it ignored. Ontario did a comprehensive review on density, a 300-page review. Ontario has recommended supplemental screening for women in category D. The task force has just totally ignored it. It has ignored the randomized control trials on density, and it just, you know, so that's the major reason why we can't access the screening that we need.
Thank you very much. I know my time is up, but I appreciate your answers.
Thank you. Adrienne, vous avez 6 minutes.
And you have 6 minutes. Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair. Ms. White,
Mrs.
Ms.
White,
Holland,
Mrs. Wallen, Mrs. Wenham-Shane,
Ms. Wahamade Shane,
Madam Holland,
Ms. Dale, Ms. Holland.
all of you.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Testimonies.
And it's an emotional
It's
topic.
quite emotional
You
today.
know, we all know a woman
a woman in our
who's close to us who had breast cancer. Some have passed away.
Breast cancer.
That's my case.
Some have died from it. It's my case. And for all these women,
Adrienne, sorry to interrupt you.
sorry.
We have 2 different people translating right now. So we'll just pause for a moment. I'll keep talking and see if it is fixed so that we'll only have 1 person translating. Okay, Adrienne, do you think you could continue?
Adrienne, go ahead.
French for a couple seconds and see if
Could you speak?
So you want me to speak to make sure everything is fine? Are you able to hear me?
Oui, je pense que c'est mieux. Oui.
I think it's better.
Okay, I'll just make sure the witnesses are able to hear. I've pressed pause on your time, Adrienne, so we're good. Okay, please continue, Adrienne.
Go ahead, Adrienne. So I will start over where I was.
Yes.
So I was saying for all of those who are fighting breast cancer, I know a young mother, she's in early 40s. She was diagnosed during her pregnancy. So she had to go through actually giving birth with all the stress for all these women. It's a bit emotional because I would like to underline the work. It was mentioned following the questions of my colleague Michel. I recently took part in an event from a foundation. It's called the Louis-Philippe Janvier Foundation, who assists young adults who suffer from cancer. So there are the 50 weeks of health insurance to be able to help adults to heal themselves with dignity, because it's not true that we could heal in 15 weeks or 26 weeks. Who can possibly remove this kind of financial stress? And 2 weeks ago, I walked in the Grand Défoulement, which comes to support the Canadian Health Society. So we're not able to help these young adults who live with cancer, who have homes to pay, who have kids to raise. So I wanted to underline the work of those two foundations. I've heard all kinds of testimonies, and I will add this to today's committee. My first question, we talked about it before, the task force. We had a task force. My colleague Michel mentioned, is it a financial issue? My colleague Emanuela asked some questions, was asking for, but perhaps about the lack of evidence. My question would be, it was mentioned in, because you will be leaving at 5:30. Ms. Seeley, you said that what you saw through the task force was concerning. You mentioned perhaps they listened to what the United States said, or they have financial issue. What concerns you the most with the task force?
Thank you very much for the question. What happens with evidence is that if you use a very strict formulary called the GRADE format, you could look at thousands of studies, but you only have the highest level of evidence that will supersede any other evidence, and that is a randomized control trial. Now, I mentioned earlier, we cannot repeat the studies that have been done for over 40 to 60 years to prove that mammography works. And that's what the task force insisted on, using the randomized control trials evidence. And so regardless of all the other studies that come after those old trials, they will always mean that that is the best level of evidence if that's the constraint that is made on the system approach. And what that meant is that it underestimated the benefit of screening mammography by almost half. And the reason why those randomized controlled trials underestimate is because they used it outdated. We don't use the same kind of equipment anymore. They had significant problems. The Canadian National Breast Cancer Screening Trial recruited women who actually had advanced breast cancers into the screening arm. They also moved patients from one arm to the other. And so it's this constraint that meant that regardless of what the outcome would be, it was predetermined by their selection of randomized control trials. And we know, and despite all our evidence to say that the U.S. did not do that, they only used evidence from 2016 on, that this was not necessary. They were very much insistent that we use that kind of evidence. I know Jenny mentioned this earlier. We know that the people who were on this task force already had a strong bias against screening mammography. They don't believe it works. They believe that treatment is the solution and that that is all that is needed for breast cancer. They have no expertise in diagnosing women who, like Carolyn and like other women who present with advanced breast cancer, the incredible, terrible toil it takes on them when they undergo this kind of treatment with long chemotherapy that can be more than 12 months long, and all of the downstream negative side effects of that chemotherapy. So it's the members themselves that were selected for that kind of bias that impose these constraints that meant that regardless of what all of the experts were saying, that they did not listen to the experts to show that there were so many changes since those randomized controlled trials that they should not use them. So I don't know if that answers the question fully, but that's the best explanation I can tell you why this was the outcome.
D'accord, 30 secondes, j'avais perdu le fil.
Thank you. 30 seconds. Madam Dale, you named this, you mentioned the issue of the task force. Could you add something to what was just said in about 30 seconds?
Yeah, well, the task force lacks accountability, it lacks transparency. As Dr. Seeley said, it's extremely anti-screening bias. The composition, there's no experts on the task force, the experts in breast cancer screening. You have an ER doctor, pediatrician, a gastroenterologist making guidelines for Canadians. And this is not just an issue that impacts breast cancer. This is an issue that impacts every guideline that the task force is making. We need expert input, and the task force lacks that.
Thank you, Ms. Dale. Thank you, Adrienne. Leah, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you so much. And I just want to start out by thanking all the witnesses. And, you know, I think your stories, particularly Madame White, Holland, Juana Deshane, speak to the fact that this is bigger than a physical illness, that people need to look at the long-term emotional and physical impacts of cancer for the survivor, but also for families. And I'm sorry that in your cases, I'll have time, I want to ask Dr. Seeley questions just because she's leaving, that was not respected, clearly. So Dr. Seeley, I know that you have come to committee to present evidence before, and we also had a witness by the name of Dr. Aoife McCurley, and she stated in a former committee a meeting, in quotes, in the U.S. it was noted that in Black, Hispanic, Asian women, breast cancer peaks at an earlier age of 40 when compared to white women. A recent Canadian analysis shows that Caucasian women are the only group whose peak evidence is greater than 50. And went on to say the task force was aware of this recent, yet to be published paper from Statistics Canada, but did not lower the screening age. She goes on to say that, which was shocking to me in that committee, she added that not only were the studies that were prioritized during the development of draft recommendations out of date, but they also used a sample population comprised of 98% white women. She added that, in quotes, with knowledge comes responsibility. So knowing the above, acknowledging higher mortality rate in Black women in the 40 to 49 age group and not acting on it is simply unethical and discriminatory. Do you feel that there needs to be more research done to look at screening ages for populations based on genetic research?
Well, let me just answer that. Dr. McCurley was actually quoting our study that has just been accepted for publication. And in Canada, all women except white women have their peak diagnosis of breast cancer under the age of 50. White women have their peak age of diagnosis at 60. Those old randomized controlled trials that I mentioned were done on 98% of white women. Women who are not white are more likely to get breast cancer under the age of 50. And this is the biggest reason that the US has lowered the screening age to 40. In Canada, if we remove the barriers of that 50 years and allow women to self-refer at age 40 and older, we will allow women who are of all race and ethnicities to participate in screening if they select and want to choose to screen. Right now, we only allow that to women 50 years and older, and this is absolutely discriminating against non-white women. And this is why we're seeing that non-white women are 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with advanced stage breast cancer in Canada than white women. And it's so critical that we address this inequity. Simply by lowering the screening age to 40 is what will allow us to remove that major barrier, because a lot of these women don't have a family physician and cannot get a referral to get a screening mammogram, even if they were allowed to.
Thank you so much, Dr. Seeley. And I wanted to move to Jenny Dale to kind of build on, we're talking about discrimination in the healthcare system. And one of the things that you mentioned, Dr. Seeley, of course, was like access to doctors, access to services. I'm wondering, Madame Dale, if you can speak about the healthcare inequities for patients that live in remote and northern communities. How are they affected in terms of being able to access screening compared to larger cities?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I cannot speak directly to the remote communities. Just speak to the inequity of women needing to get a requisition in their 40s and they don't have anyone to ask for that requisition. So we have women are being denied the chance to get screening. That's all I can speak to, is the shortage of family doctors and the inability to get that requisition, and why we need self-referral to eliminate the inequity.
Thank you so much. I'm going to move on first to you, Madame Holland. You spoke about, I believe it was you that spoke about how when you had like women often have to continue working, women have to, or the patient has to continue on with survival, just doing things to survive. Do you think the government needs to look at putting in programs during and long-term support programs for survivors of cancer, and in this case, breast cancer, including mental health supports and programs like that?
Leah, unfortunately, your time is up, so I'm going to allow you about maybe 25 seconds to answer, just because it was a really good question. But I do know that our next witness does want to perhaps pose Ms. Seeley one question, and I know you're wishing to leave at 5, or you need to leave at 5:30. So if you could just be patient, just about 30 seconds, we'll get moving. Okay, Carolyn, Ms. Holland, if you could answer in about 25 seconds or less.
Thank you. I could pass the question to Kimberly, the other witness. I was fortunate. I had sick leave at my job and I had access to long-term disability, whereas I know Kimberly was in the position where she had to continue working.
Yes, I was an advanced manager and I took one day of for vacation for my chemo, and I went back to work after the weekend and worked throughout all my treatments. I worked every day through radiation. I was third degree burns. I finished 30 radiations and actually went to my remote camp. I wrapped a big bandage around, and you just keep going, you know. So yeah, there should be some type of benefit, or one of the things that my
If I may,
sorry.
I do need to leave you there, but perhaps the title of the report could say, just keep going. Dominique, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I will go to Dr. Seeley right away since you have to leave. First of all, thank you to each one of you to be with us this afternoon. Dr. Seeley, quickly, I know you have to leave, but sometimes we hear some myths. For example, diagnostic can be harmful. I'd like to have your opinion on this. Also, the second thing in which you could help us, let's say that women from 40 years old could have access to those this kind of screening. How many lives would be saved, in your opinion?
Let me answer the second question. I think we have very good evidence that shows, with modeling in Canada, If we started screening women at age 40, we would save at least 400 women's lives every year. If you imagine 2 airplane jets filled with women, that's how many lives we would save by starting screening at age 40. And that's even an underestimation. For the second question,
Je m'excuse, madame. Juste une petite
I
seconde.
apologize. We don't have interpretation.
dire en français.
Okay, we need, okay,
I'll
perfect.
tell you in French. Yes, no problem at all. We can save with modeling tests 400 lives, women's lives per year will be saved if we start screening from 40 years old. And it is an underestimation. We think it could be much more, but at least 2 planes full of women. And doctor, please tell me, diagnostic, is it dangerous? Listen, I could tell you, I could talk to you about it, but it's a diagnosis of a cancer that would not lead to the death of the patient. When there's an overdiagnosis, because the woman will die from other causes. So when a woman is in her 40s, the probability that she will die from her breast cancer is over 90%. The overdiagnosis is much more a problem of a woman who's older, who would most likely die from a separate cause like cardiovascular disease or other. Thank you very much. Now I will ask my next question to Madame White. You were quite emotional earlier.
Je pense que les femmes ont une charge mentale terrible sur les épaules. Terrible. Et je pense que les femmes, au niveau de la santé des femmes, il n'y a pas mieux. Bon, un petit peu.
Okay, so we're having some trouble with interpretation.
Okay, we're back. Interpretation is back. Can I go ahead? Okay. I think that in the field of women's health, women are well positioned, I think, to recognize they know their bodies and they take care of their families frequently, whether it's urinary infections, whether it's symptoms of menopause. It's not something happening in their mind, it's something going on in their body. So when they have doubts and they express that to their physician, that maybe something is not going well, then we might want to check if everything is going well. Then I think the physicians ought to listen to them. And Ms. White, just to build on the testimony of Ms. Kimberly, they went through the stages following that, whether it's anger, whether it's a lot of emotion, mental health, maybe vulnerable and fragile, anxiety and stress, financial problems. What happened to you after that? Is it okay if I answer in English? Yes.
It's very, very difficult. For me, I've been trying to advocate for better so that other women don't have to go through this. And for me, I apologize for that I'm emotional, but this is very helpful because if we can improve things and other women don't have to go through this, then that's what I'm hoping to achieve.
C'est important qu'on sache.
It's important for us to be aware what women are going through because they have to experience cancer that normally ought not to have been experienced because normally it should have been diagnosed. It would have been caught in time. So that's the story of it. So maybe you went through all kinds of stages, difficult stages that you have to avoid women going through. Yes. I can answer. Yes, go ahead. I don't want to put words in Cheryl's mouth, but just as you described it, for me, to start with, I doubted the reality. I asked myself, how come? I thought it's impossible. We're told all the time that it doesn't happen to women in their 40s. It's a disease of older women. That's always what they say. But ultimately, I went through, I would say, really kind of a, well, I was really, after having been diagnosed, I didn't know what to do. And I spent a weekend not sleeping, not eating, not moving. I didn't even cry. I was thinking about my son and my family and what are we going to do? What will I do? The fact that for all three of us, these were late diagnoses at more advanced stages. So the idea that I'm going to lose my breasts, I'm going to have my breasts amputated, I'm going to go through chemo, I'm going to be ill, I won't be able to work, maybe I'll die and leave my 13-year-old son. All of that because there are people who think that they know better. There are people who think that it's not worthwhile or that it's not worth the cost. So there are all kinds of emotions between anger and sadness and what do you call it? You just can't believe that it's possible.
Thank you. Pam, you have 5 minutes. Well, actually, I'm going to give you about 5.5 because I was quite generous with
Okay, thank you. Thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. And Kimberly, I'm replacing Mark Saray, and he was very disappointed that he wasn't here today. He's out of town. So thank you for being here, and I'm sending along Mark's gratitude as well for you being here. I think we've lost Dr. Seeley, unfortunately. There's a doctor at McMaster, Dr. Juliet Daniel, who's doing incredible research on XXX breast cancer in Black women. And I think it was Dr. Seeley who mentioned that women who get XXX breast cancer are more likely to die. I visited Dr. Daniel's lab and met with her team. She's underfunded in her research, so I'm not surprised by what we're hearing today about Black women, Indigenous women, non-Caucasian women being excluded from the research. It doesn't surprise me in the least. So if the committee is looking for a Black woman to come and talk about it, Dr. Daniel would be an exceptional witness if you have time. My sister was diagnosed in 2019 and has had surgery, chemo, radiation, and then now tamoxifen. It sucks. I'm sorry, there's just no other way to describe the ordeal that you go through. And Cheryl, I think you're very strong. I'm a crier too, so I can relate, and it's okay. I want to talk about the task force, though, because I have had issues with the task force for years, and I've met with Canadian Perinatal Mental Health folks. They have issues with the guidelines as well. So we're talking about breast cancer today, but just the methodology. Now, I'm sure you all saw that the health minister today announced the external expert review panel, and I think we're all happy to see that. I would really like, maybe I'll start with Dense Breast because I've met with you for probably 5 or 6 years now. What would you like to see? I mean, should the task force be disbanded? How do you get expert input into that task force? How would you like to see it work to come up with the guidelines? Because they are separate from government.
Yes, absolutely. It's an arm's length body. We agree there's a place for an arm's length body when it comes to scientific evidence, but an arm's length body needs to have accountability. This body does not have accountability. When it was restructured, brought back in 2009, we missed the accountability oversight aspect of it. So we would like the task force to be, we need task force reform, and we would like to see the guidelines suspended. It's going to take time for the external expert review to file their report. It's not due until spring. In the meantime, we have women getting later stage diagnoses. We need these guidelines suspended immediately, and they can be replaced with provincial guidelines. The provinces are moving forward. The provinces are following the science. The provinces are following the experts. All the provinces, except we're waiting for Quebec, but all the provinces have announced or they have implemented screening at 40. So we can follow the provinces, and we can also replace the
Who would
task
you like
force.
to see, sorry, who would you like to see the task force accountable to?
the task force has to be accountable. The health minister is not able to get rid of the chair of the task force who has shown anti-screening bias. PHAC was not able to get rid of the chair. So the task force has to be the health minister has to have the ability to act when dangerous guidelines are being implemented, not just for breast, but for all different areas. So we need somebody to be able to, oversee this. We need a governance structure. This is beyond my pay grade, but we need something in the interim basis that includes experts. There's the Royal College, full of experts there. You could make a panel that includes experts as well as patients, because right now we don't have expert input into the guidelines. So we need a whole restructuring.
Do you think it should be one task force, or should the task force be tasked with creating an expert panel because it's not just breast cancer screening that they do. So you don't want to put breast cancer experts on the panel and have them providing advice on perinatal mental health, right? Would it make sense that the panel appoints individual panels of subject matter experts to do the guidelines?
That would be great. That really would.
Personally have a problem with them reporting to a politician. I don't think politics should be involved. I think it should be someone independent, because you don't want politicians interfering in scientific evidence, right? I agree with the accountability, but I think probably the structure needs to change, and there has been a lack of experts. So I think I'm done. Oh, another 30 seconds. Kimberly and Cheryl, you've come here and told your stories. What do you have any advice on what we should do with this panel?
Well, I think having the experts, having more witnesses, having other people share their stories that have been look at Janica, she was 28. I had my son when I was 27. He would have been 1, right? Like, hear the true raw, the good, bad, and the ugly.
It wouldn't be the first time that patient advocates were part of decisions, not the only people involved, but would you support patient advocates being part of a review of guidelines?
I would.
It's up to the chair.
Just if you could quickly, Cheryl, thank you.
I'm an engineer, and we have to measure our results all the time. I would like the task force to have transparency, measure the results, and involve the people that will be affected by the guidelines, so patients and experts. Thank you.
Chair, may I?
Excellent. Sure. I'm generous today.
And if I could add to that too, again, saying that we've heard from the task force that the working group did include patient advocates. There were patients involved. However, what we heard from those patients was that their input was disregarded, that they were essentially window dressing, that they were asked to weigh in on things that were, completely beyond their scope of understanding, so that it just reads as a box checking exercise. So when we're talking about accountability and transparency, to have the task force come out and say, well, we consulted with experts and we consulted with patients, but it's really just in name, not actually in function.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Adrienne? Please go ahead. You have approximately 2.5 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you, Chair. We hear a lot of things about the task force and the guidelines, but I would like to return to one aspect. And Cheryl, Ms. White, rather, sorry, you raised something that I consider essential to this, how much difficulty you had in getting a family physician. So to what extent also behind these guidelines for 50 years, isn't it also a way of hiding the fact that we've underinvested in our health system, that we were not able, and perhaps if they reduce it to 40, it's because the resources are not there, unfortunately, to be able to take care of people appropriately. And to what degree is that issue of the underinvestment or underfunding of the health system and health transfers over the years perhaps puts us in a position where they're trying to hide behind the fact that, oh no, we could have more targeted measures for more high-risk women because they're worried about the consequences, whereas in fact, we've seen that the earlier they detect it, it's a false debate because it costs less when you detect it earlier than aggressive treatments. But this concern about the funding and not to be able to provide the adequate treatment by bringing it down to 40. What do you think about that?
So I think that if you don't say what the problem is, if you're not talking about the fact that the system is underfunded or that we don't have enough resource, then we can't solve that problem. If we're talking about, oh, it's not necessary, we don't need to have screening for women that are 40 because it's not going to help much, it might cause harm, then no one's working on that problem. No one is trying to find resources. Maybe there is a more efficient way of screening women, but we won't be pursuing that because it all seems fine because the experts are saying, don't worry about it, you don't need to be screened. So I think until you call out the right problem, you can't solve it. And I think that's an important thing for us to do.
So to you, you demonstrated also that prevention is really a way of getting savings in the long term for the health system. There's a cost in waiting till later to detect cancer at later stages. So the whole issue of the task force and the guidelines, the importance of reinvesting appropriately in the healthcare system, also, and to make sure that we can provide treatment of those women who should be detected earlier.
If I'd gotten my diagnosis 2 or 3 years earlier. But it's very likely I wouldn't have required as much chemotherapy, as much immunotherapy, as much radiation, as difficult of a surgery. So it's very likely that if I'd had access to that screening when I was younger, I would have had an easier go of treatment, and it also would have saved the country, province money.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Leah?
Yes, I'm just shaking my head. Every time we've had witnesses come for this study, it's just so horrifying. The stories of just not listening but I wanted to allow you a chance to finish what you were sharing before because you weren't able to. So.
Well, I think my oncologist wanted me to take injections as well to help me with my white blood count. And there were $2,500 a pop. So that would have wiped out my insurance. And I did my research. I spoke to other survivors and I chose not to. And she was so rude to me. It was incredible. So I don't know if did they get a double dip on this, I chose not to. I went to the health food store. I got some Immunofin to help me with my white blood count, and my white blood count was fine. Another natural therapy that I did was Nature's Aid. You have third-degree burns on your arms. The doctors were giving me, telling everybody that you need this other cream. I spoke to 2 other girls who were getting radiation. They had the cream, and they actually had open wounds from the cream. So I didn't do the cream. I did Nature's Aid. I applied it every day. I cut my bra so that I could just lather it like almost, like a Vaseline, right? Just keep it like that.
So that brings to a point. I mean, I spoke about other sorts of care, but one of the things we've just started, hopefully we have a pharmacare program coming through. The fact that you had to suffer because of cost, that you couldn't get the medication you need, this is horrifying to me. Like, I'm hoping that we can, see a rapid expansion of pharmacare. Your story is just awful, and I don't want to patronize either, but it's grotesque. that you had that treatment because you couldn't afford the drugs. Do you support a pharmacare plan, an extension of the pharmacare plan, so that you just get the medication you need when you need it?
When you need it.
I wanted to ask you, Madame Holland, I feel a little emotional as well. I'm very lucky in my family. Both my sisters have had breast cancer. I'm Indigenous, so I'm in a higher. I'm the only one, knock on wood, that hasn't. I wasn't screened till 50. And this is horrifying. I know you spoke about a one-size-fits-all. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Oh, for sure I can. So again, to say with the task force that the tools that they provide essentially for family doctors or even for women themselves to choose or to decide if they want screening, it doesn't take into account additional risk factors. It doesn't take into account ethnicity. It doesn't take into account breast density. So when you're only looking at the figures that apply to, typical white woman, you're not in a position to make an informed decision because, again, as you said, you're at higher risk for potentially having incidents in your 40s. If you don't know that, are you going to advocate for screening? If you don't know that, how are you going to make a sound decision? If you don't know your breast density, how are you going to know that you're at risk? So we know that dense breasts put you at higher risk of breast cancer. But if you don't have a mammogram, you can't know what your density is.
Thank you, Ms. Holland.
Oh, thank you.
Anna, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses. I wore pink today because cancer has impacted every single one of us here in some form, whether I wore pink, and I can't believe you're 50. Anyway, I want to make a statement, and then my question is going to go to Cheryl. So it feels like the task force is mistaking women for ostriches. We don't stick our heads in the sand. We face challenges, and knowledge is power. Our healthcare system has taken the patient out of patient care and is more concerned about financial care. That's how I feel today. And I'm really disappointed because as women, I feel that we've been left out in the cold. So Cheryl, I need to ask you something because I recently attended the ABC fundraiser, which is an organization in Ontario called After Breast Cancer. And I had the opportunity to speak with a young woman whose grandmother had cancer, her mother had cancer, her sister had breast cancer, they all had breast cancer. She was in her late 20s, early 30s, and she was not eligible for a mammogram. Was there history in your family?
So my grandmother had breast cancer and my aunt had breast cancer.
So
some of my grandmother's sisters, I think, as well.
So it's in the family.
Yes.
Okay. So here's my thinking, and maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Why are we waiting till 40? If history has it, in your case and in this young woman, and in some of my family members who, every single person in their family had cancer, why are we even waiting till 40?
I don't understand. As I said before, I'm an engineer, and we're thinking about things as being proactive. We're thinking about preventing things and planning ahead. And I don't understand why there is so much wait and see in medicine. There's so much, well, we'll catch it when it gets bad enough, and then we'll treat you. It's backwards to the way I think about things, the way I would treat my car. I wouldn't wait to get an oil change until my car broke down.
No, exactly.
So I don't understand why it's accepted.
I saw her. Yeah.
Sorry, did I do something wrong?
No. There's somebody with their hand up. It's okay.
Oh, okay. I can't understand why women's health isn't worthy of more prevention and early detection. That would make things a lot better for us.
I know. Is it Jenny?
Jenny. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Jenny, yes. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I saw your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, We know that there is a rising incidence of breast cancer in women in the 20s and 30s, but right now we don't have the technology, the tools to detect cancer in women that young because mammograms, the radiation from mammograms may not be negligible around 40, but it can have an impact in the 20s and 30s as well. The density of breast is going to be high in the 20s and 30s, and mammograms probably wouldn't be that effective at all. So hopefully we'll have a blood test soon or other methods of detection, but right now we just don't have the means to detect. So we have to rely on self-exam and body awareness.
So I'm sorry to interrupt there, Jenny, but I believe we do have a blood test.
It's not ready for prime time yet.
Okay, so I guess my question would be, there's a history, there's a pattern here. And I think, Cheryl, you said it best, you don't wait to get an oil change, you get it done before the car breaks down,
If there's
right?
a history, certainly if a woman has a history of breast cancer, first degree relative in her family, she's going to be given some form of screening, ultrasound or mammography, depending on her age, 10 years earlier. And I think that you're pointing out a really good thing here in that a lot of women are falling through the cracks because they're not being assessed. A lot of family doctors don't know the patient's history. They're not doing a risk assessment. There's a tool that takes about 2 minutes to do. It's called IBIS. And we need every family doctor in Canada using this risk assessment tool on women between ages 25 and 30 so that we can determine who is high risk and who needs, more screening, MRI annually or whatever.
So maybe what we need to do is go back and provide doctors with the education that they need and to listen to the patients, because listening to the ladies here, I find it very strange that you know your body better than any one of us. Like, how many of us knew we were pregnant before we were pregnant? We know our body, right? Like, there's something inside of me growing, hey. So I'm just trying to state a fact, right? So we need to make sure we educate these doctors so that they listen to us and say, hey, I'm demanding a mammogram because this is what I have found, and we shouldn't have to do that. Are they not trained to listen to their patients? Maybe we need to go back to the drawing board and implement that in the medical schools.
I don't think that it's not that they're trained not to listen to their patients.
I'm sorry to interrupt. If you could just acknowledge yes, no, or maybe, then we unfortunately need to go on because Anna has exhausted her time.
That's not very nice. Yes, go ahead. Yes or no, yeah. Okay. Yep. Okay, we got a consensus. Let's go.
Perfect, Sonia.
Change it now.
Please go ahead, Sonia.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, all the witnesses, being with us. My first questions goes to Ms. Dale. Ms. Dale, we all know that the more dense breast, they develop more cancer. They have more chance to develop breast cancer as with the women with the non-dense breasts. So what question can women ask during their regular appointments with their healthcare providers to receive referral for further screening? Because mostly women, they don't know what to ask, like with the dense breast, as you said, the women with the 20 to 30 year age, they have more dense breast, but what they should looking for?
Well, the only way you can know your breast density is from a mammogram. So it would apply to women 40 and up. And women in the majority of the country are being told their breast density now. Only in Newfoundland are they not. So every woman can find out their category A, B, C, D. And if they're a category C or D, then they need to have a conversation with their family doctor. They need to be informed. They need to be assertive. They need to state that they need more than that mammogram. They need a requisition for additional screening. And again, they need to know their risk. Maybe they need MRI instead of ultrasound. So they need to be able to, speak up for themselves. And many family doctors are not educated on breast density. And they're not getting that education in medical school. Breast density, breast cancer, they're getting very limited education. So a woman really has to be her own advocate. She has to be informed.
This is also raising a question. Do you think the doctor should need more education on this when you said that they need to send the dense breast because mostly they did not know that? Do you think there should be education added to some modules so they can look into that?
Absolutely. There is a huge education gap. This is the biggest obstacle we face. And if our doctors were more educated, then we would have less later stage diagnoses because more women would be sent. Right now, doctors are negating the, the issue with breast density because they are not informed. And so you're having patients being more informed than their own doctor, and you have a power imbalance. And it's difficult for a patient to speak up when a doctor says, oh, you don't have to worry about your breast density. It's difficult for a patient to push back on that.
I want to ask Ms. Holland, did your doctor ask to any other test like the BRCA1, BRCA2? Because this is something, if it's a genetic test for mutation. Did your doctor ask for that?
No, my experience with my diagnosis and everything was that my doctor never raised anything about breast cancer, anything about screening, not when I turned 40 or when I was older, between 40 and 43. My family doctor took my history, and I do have not first-degree relatives, but there is breast cancer in my family, but that didn't seem to figure into anything. The other side of my family history is completely unknown. So that being the case, again, it's, I would say, very hard for anybody to assess my risk. There was no suggestion. I know genetic testing obviously is I'll say very expensive, and unless there really is that first, it's my understanding that unless there is a cluster of cases in the immediate family, you probably wouldn't be sent. Ultimately, once I had my diagnosis, at that point, I was sent for genetic testing, and I do not carry that mutation. Again, I'm one of the 85% of all breast cancers where there is no family history. The IBIS risk calculator that Jenny spoke to, I would have scored low. So all of these things, it's the mammogram. Had I had access, had I been able to self-refer at 40, I would have caught this. I'm proactive with my health. I would have caught it at 40 or whenever it came up, and it wouldn't have been as advanced and necessitating, and so to Jenny's point too, that yes, I think my family doctor, and I understand too, again, family doctors, they have to be, jacks of all trades. But again, then when faced with patients questioning or asking or wanting to know more, the gatekeeping and the refusal to refer or the refusal to give, again, whether that is a matter of finances, bill, I don't know the answer, but I don't think they're doing a service to patients by gatekeeping care.
Thank you. Madam Chair, do you have more time?
That's 5 minutes, so we'll move on to the next.
Thank you.
Thank you. So to the members, I have been quite liberal, or I have been quite generous with my time. So at this point, I will be a little bit more tight on to get a full third round in. So we're going to start. Sorry. So we're starting the third round. We'll have Michelle. Thank you. Michelle, yeah.
Thank you so much, and thanks again, ladies, for being here. We're talking about breast cancer screening, some shocking stats we've heard today. It is my understanding that everyone here that's testifying today would be in agreement to move screening age from 50 years old to 40. Is that correct? I got a nod from everyone on here. I think as Miss Dale, you said self-referral would be even your bigger ask for that younger age as well. Is that correct?
Yes, and we do have self-referral announced and implemented pretty much across the country, aside from Quebec, which is under review right now. So Ontario just began yesterday. 845 cancers are going to be found in the 40 to 49 age group because of this move. So it's wonderful to see the country moving forward. It's just the problem is that the task force still plays a huge influence on and has a huge influence on doctors. That's what they are following. And so they may not suggest to women that they can self-refer, or, how are women going to find out that they can self-refer? And if the doctors are still following the task force, they may try to dissuade women. This was in the testimony already, but, we still have the obstacle of the task force, even though the provinces are moving forward.
So it's an interesting point you brought up, right? Because and not to miss, I'm going to say your last name right, Wahama Deshen. Can I call you Kimberly? Thank you. Kimberly, your story, you're all amazing. You're all powerful testimony. But I mean, we've directly heard here today that you were trying to self-refer. So it's like, I was trying, I was asking repeatedly, and it still didn't punch through to sort of our paternalistic approach to medicine, right? So I think that's got to be out there on the record for that. The other point you brought up, Kimberly, that I think is really important, because we have a bill in the House right now that is aiming to sort of kibosh natural health products. And that obviously wasn't, I don't believe anybody in the natural health product industry was consulted by anybody with breast cancer in that, right? So obviously natural health products were a big piece of your treatment and recovery.
Yes, absolutely, and it still is. I was on tamoxifen for 4 years, and I was bleeding down there. So I stopped because I could die from uterine cancer. So I made that choice, and my doctor was not very happy about that. But
And that's another, listen, I think we could all go out for a big drink of coffee after this and have some big conversations. It sure would be nice if naturopaths and doctors would communicate, because I think there's value in a lot of these health professionals that think outside of the box, as we sort of have to live and travel and of what's actually happening in our health world and our bodies. I just want to leave it with Ms. Holland. The task force, what we just heard from Jenny here is very powerful. The task force has influence, and their influence based on the members that are on that board are saying 50. And yet I don't see any survivors on that task force. And I think that is a very critical piece. I think that's why this is here at our Status of Women Committee right now, because, you have this panel of experts. And this is what I always tell my kids. Who are the experts and where is the data coming from? So I just give you the floor to put on the record what you'd like to say about the task force.
I very much appreciate it. Thank you. That's really, you got to the core of it. It's that who are the experts and where is the data coming from? And as Jenny mentioned earlier, the experts who are making guidelines for breast cancer, but also we've heard postpartum depression, prostate cancer, lung cancer, cervical cancer. These are family doctors, there's a gastroenterologist, there are nurse practitioners, there's an ER doctor. These are not subject matter experts. We always hear from them that they're experts in methodology, but they have no understanding of the information, of the evidence, of the data that they're getting, because it is not their area of practice. Again, we wouldn't allow someone to practice outside their area, yet here we are with a task force made up of folks who aren't in their area of practice. So again, I think it's a breach of the public's trust when they're getting information. They believe, if you asked any Canadian who's making the breast screening guidelines, I'm sure they would say an oncologist, a radiologist, someone who knows cancer. It is none of those things. So yes, that is a very astute question to say who's providing this information and where's it coming from. We heard 60-year-old studies, flawed, corrupted studies. This is the data that's being used.
Thank you so much for that. I just want to say it would be nice to have an economist on that task force to say the financial impact of not investing in prevention.
Thank you, Michelle. Lisa, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And I will echo my colleagues and thank you all very much for attending today, for your very important testimony, for being so honest and straightforward and bearing your souls. It's really important and it's valuable that you're here today. I will go back to Jenny Dale. Did I overhear that you're also a physician?
No, I'm a breast cancer survivor. I'm going to
Okay,
mark 10
so I
years.
thought I heard somebody call you Dr. Dale, and I didn't want to be remiss.
And I
and
just want to thank you for having 4 patients, allowing our voices to be heard.
Well, sticking with you, Jenny, I think you mentioned that before 2009, the task force was revived in 2009. What was it like? What happened before the task force? What did we have before 2009?
We had a task force that was disbanded in 2005 by the Liberal government. Carolyn Bennett disbanded it. We did have a task force. And so when it was reinstated in 2009, it was not done through PHAC. It was done through the University of Calgary. And somewhere along the line, an accountability structure was omitted.
Do you have any, you already talked a little bit about how you would like to see that task force be set up, how you would like it to be different. Do you have anything
specialty
further to add on
societies.
that?
Pardon. We definitely would like to see specialty societies involved in the guidelines of patients as well, content experts.
And we've also heard today that, I mean, Ontario has just lowered the guidelines to 40. I had a different experience from all of you. When I turned 40, my family doctor in Ontario said, it's not the guideline, but you're 40, I'm gonna send you for breast screening. So there are different, it depends, it seems to depend really on the family doctor you get. So I guess my question is, if the province has reduced the screening to 40, and most provinces have, what is the impact of the federal guidelines? Does it matter? Do doctors listen to that? I'll start with you, Jenny, but then I'll ask the rest of you to comment as well.
Yeah, it's their Bible. Listen, as Carolyn said, doctors can't be jack of all trades. They follow those guidelines for prostate, cervical, colon, postpartum depression, the whole gamut. And the guideline says 50, and the guideline, the information that they are given is inaccurate, misleading, it's been manipulated, but this is the information they're getting. They're being told it's less common in the 40s to get breast cancer. They're not being told it's more aggressive. They're being told the harms and balances, they're not as significant, the benefits in the 40s. So that's what they're conveying to their patients, focusing on the harms. So they are huge, huge influence. As long as we have this task force, women are going to be dissuaded, discouraged, and denied breast cancer screening in Canada.
And doctors aren't paying attention to the provincial guidelines? Is that what you're saying?
Some of them will still try to dissuade because the information that they have been given from the breast screening program focuses on the harms. It does not focus on the benefits. And we can show you that.
Who would like to, of the three, go ahead, Cheryl.
So I have a little example that might help. A few years ago, I went to my surgeon, so it was post-surgery, and I asked him for supplemental screening because I have dense breasts. And he said, no, it's not recommended. The task force says you don't need that. And I told him that there were no oncologists on the task force. And his jaw dropped. He didn't know that. And so he has been telling all of his patients, you don't need supplemental screening. I told him that, and he said at the next appointment that ever since he's been recommending ultrasounds for all of his patients with dense breasts. So doctors don't have time to be conspiracy theorists about the task force giving them bad advice. They just have to assume that they're getting good advice because the government of Canada stands behind it. This is the official word of the experts. And I don't think a lot of doctors know that there aren't any experts on the task force in oncology.
Carolyn, go ahead.
Please. Again, Cheryl had mentioned about that power imbalance. Jenny brought it up as well. I think the reality is, again, we've all said it, that despite what is going on in the provinces, which is admirable, laudable, all of this, and it's great, and for women who are proactive and who are confident in those decisions and know and maybe have someone who's told them, listen, just go and get it done. But as you said, there is a difference. There's a material difference in who your doctor is and what information you're getting. And so the fact of the matter is that the province of Ontario is still saying, like, the narrative, the literature that's surrounding this rollout is that you should have a discussion with your doctor. And so if what your doctor is telling you is that information from the task force, that the risk of a false positive, which is a misnomer, is very high. That's scary. And, oh, you might be overdiagnosed and that's dangerous. And, oh, all these, fallacies, radiation and this and that. And yes, it does bear on it that, again, we know that despite what's going on in the provinces, that, again, as we've all said, the task force holds clout. It has been very well established and deep seated, and it does take a lot to move the needle on people's entrenched beliefs about the value of screening.
Thank you, Ms. Holland. Adrienne, you have 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Madame
Thank you, Madam Chair. Listen, we don't have enough time here, but Miss Wahama Deshain, I would like to kind of end on a more positive note. I'd like you to talk us about your Trust Your Bust fund. So I'd like to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit more about what you've been able to do with that fund.
So I created the Trust Your Bust Fund through the Northern Cancer Center in Sudbury, and was able to raise money to help for research through RNA diagnostics in Sudbury. I was also able to help families like Janica's. You know, she had 3 young kids. It was going to be Christmas, so the community got together and we got some Christmas gifts for these young kids. You know, I think there's a lot of funds that are with the different cancer centers, and it's, again, bringing awareness. You know, Trust Your Bust. I have 40, you know, everybody's under the age, right? You know, they tell their stories. Again, and one other thing I would recommend is including men. What stats do you have on the 1% of men? Greg Baden was 28, again.
Merci pour,
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you do. It's admirable. And so I'll like to finish with Miss Holland. You know, we talked about research and the importance of investing. So the importance of acting sooner, but on new technologies and new treatments. With your experience, you know, with what you, so research can't be neglected for victims, for survivors.
Absolutely, that's a really valid point. I think, again, saying what's interesting is that as treatments are getting better and survivors are living longer, that the need for more therapies, more therapeutics to, again, ensure that there's a good quality of life, it really is, it's critical. You know, there are certain drugs now that are beneficial in preventing recurrences, but the studies around them are still limited in the pools, in the sample.
Thank you so much, Ms. Holland.
Oh.
Thank you, Adrienne. Leah, 2.5 minutes.
So I have a question actually for everybody, and we heard a lot about power and balance. So my question is, and I know we only have 2.5 minutes for all the witnesses, what does power and justice look like for you in that relationship? We'll start with Madame White, and then we'll go down. And
ultimately, a shared decision kind of has to be the patient's decision. So when you go into a doctor's office, they have all of the knowledge of the science, and they're supposed to coach you, but you're supposed to be able to make the decision. This is what I want for myself. Based on everything you've told me, this is what I think is best. So I think having access to screening when we want it, I think that's what we need. Thank you.
I agree, absolutely. And I think, again, back to my point, that having the appropriate information, that, again, if, you know, we don't supposed to be experts in medicine, but we do ultimately bear the risk for ourselves. So we should be able to be given accurate and true information to make those decisions and to be able to refer ourselves.
And I think when I go back to the oncologist, you know, she wasn't listening to me. I had to trust my body with her. And when I said no, she blocked me. She almost threatened me. And that was before my first chemo.
Madame Dale? Oh, you're on mute, Madame Dale.
Yeah, I agree with the accurate information. We need public awareness campaigns. And we also, women should not have to advocate so hard. They should not have to go crying, demanding. The onus should not be on women.
I think we have a little bit more time. Does anybody want to share anything else around that? In terms of justice and power, what does that look like for you as a survivor?
Okay, you're bringing up another issue of survivorship also, which could be another study, we hope, because women with breast cancer are not given the surveillance that they need. In Canada, the standard of care does not recognize individual risks or differences. It's mammography. After you've had breast cancer, you get a mammogram, an annual mammogram. What about if you have dense breasts? Or, there's so many other factors to take into consideration. So power and justice also applies to breast cancer survivors. We're not getting what we need after breast cancer, not before and not after.
Thank you very much. Dominique, you have 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. These have been very important and instructive discussions. Now, the library provided us with a bit of information on the state of the situation in each province. Our teams, went to each province to get information, and it's quite encouraging. There are a number of provincial governments that have decided to not listen to the guidelines. So, and I think that's the good news here. So there are professionals locally, regionally, and provincially who have decided to lower the screening age to 40. And for some province, it's more 45 in that ballpark. So that's based on the recommendations that you've made. So this is good. Now, Quebec is still at 50 to 64 years, but there's light at the end of the tunnel. Quebec could also go ahead with and bring the age down to 40. So I've had health issues myself. I won't go into detail, but there is lived experience around the table and in our families. And in my family a few years ago, one of my cousins had both her breasts removed, and she was in her 30s. And it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And it's an incredible ordeal to go through. So, and imagine the distress that must come with that. So, Dr. Seeley, you talked about equity and fairness to bringing the age down to 40. I mean, it's a health issue. We have statistics that back it up, but that it was a question of equity or fairness. How do you see that, bringing the age down to 40, how do you see that as a question of equity? And then we'll go to the four others.
So I was listening to all of that and reflecting on the fact that the four patients that are providing testimony are all white women that were diagnosed in their 40s. So even though it's even more important for women of color, it also affects white women. I don't know. I don't know if it's enough to just drop it to 40 to make things equitable. I don't know. But I was thinking about that too.
No, it absolutely occurred to me, obviously, being diagnosed in my 40s, that had I lived in a different jurisdiction, I would have had access to mammography and it would have been caught earlier. So it's not lost on, I think, any of us. Again, and the idea to think that your ethnicity or your genetics could put you in even more at an even larger disadvantage of being able to take care of yourself, it's unconscionable. And so in speaking of equity, that this, again, back to the one size fits all, it's not working for women. And so it needs to be happening more on an individual basis, talking about looking at the risk assessment that can be done by doctors, and just the public education and being able to advocate and know. I think that's it for women, to know if you're at higher risk, do something, and then on the other side, be allowed to do it too.
Je suis totalement d'accord avec vous.
I agree with you. Ms. White, I found that you were very generous in your comments. You said, my doctor was upset by what was happening as well. You're very generous. I would have been livid. I would have been very angry. So how did that happen with that doctor? Like what happened with her? Did she change her way of doing things after?
I think so. So the doctor I had before was nearing retirement, right? She had seen a lot. She gave me advice to get screening. The new doctor I found was much, much younger, and probably has to rely more on things like guidelines, because there is so much material and knowledge that they need to know. So I'm not angry at my doctor for following the guidelines that are put in front of her, and she's told this is the way of knowing. This is the best evidence that we have as Canadians. I'm not angry with her, but I do think that she was badly affected. Her voice on the phone, I was between staging appointments and things like that. She was clearly upset. In conversations since, when I've advocated for care, she's been more, we've had a different kind of conversation.
Thank you, Ms. White. Thank you, Ms. White. Thank you, Dominique. Anita, you have 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much. And I just want to thank your bravery also in telling your personal stories, because it really does make a difference. And I guess the main question that I have, because with just a few minutes left, is the last question, is if there is any particular thing that you feel that you didn't get a chance to say today that you want to add and leave with this committee. And I'll start with you, Cheryl.
I'm really frustrated that the RCT from the 80s still stands. I'm really frustrated that there is no pressure to have it retracted. We know that there was a failure to properly randomize patients. I read this book during chemo. It won the Pulitzer Prize. It talks about that, and that study is still standing. So that's the thing I think I would really like to have some light on. Thank you.
Yeah. Caroline?
Thank you. I think, again, to kind of add to that, it really is, it's mind-boggling, and I think the public is not aware of what is going on, that this very small group of non-experts control so much of our fates and have so much power unfettered by any kind of accountability, and that I do appreciate we don't want politics intervening, but that there are no mechanisms to remove someone who is so overtly biased and who is wreaking havoc and literally destroying lives with their deep-seated biases. To me, it's unfathomable. And it really, it needs to be rectified. Thank you.
I think when I was first diagnosed, I was presenting at the Influential Women's Awards in Sudbury. And I went and I had a little pink book, because I kind of knew I was getting diagnosed. And my doctor said, well, you're looking very professional and styling in pink. I think they has to, well, this is what she gave me. So it was a pink bag that, no offense to some of the ladies who sewed these little pink bags, and there was a little pillow in the bag and a poem on cloud paper and one book about the treatments of what you're supposed to take for chemo. And I'm like, I don't even know if I have to get chemo yet. I have been in golf tournaments and got better loot. So you're given this lame bag, and I'm like, what's the pillow for? Well, it's for your lumbac or your lymph nodes. I'm like, I haven't even had any surgery. I haven't had anything yet. And then on the flip side, when our when you leave, did you get a package? Did you get any ideas? Did you get any natural remedies? There's no pre and post package. So what are we supposed to do? You research, you Google, you go to the health food store, you go for Reiki. I went for Reiki before each therapy, before each chemotherapy. That really grounded me. And, you know, chemo was supposed to heal me, not F chemo, you know, like you had to embrace this. So education and give us some good packages coming in and going out. I'm all about the loot.
Well, you have done amazing in raising awareness, even just today, even just for, I think, many of us. So there's clearly a need for more education and allow people to do the self-advocacy that you're talking about. I don't think I got to Jenny, so I'll go to Jenny, and I think if there's time, Carolyn wanted to say something else. Go ahead, Jenny. Oh, can't hear you. Can't hear you.
You're on mute.
Just to reiterate, the evidence is very clear. Dr. Seeley presented all the Canadian evidence. We have the modeling. We have the US lowering the screening age based on racial disparities and the rising incidence. What is it that we're missing here in Canada? Why are we not acting? We need to take action immediately because lives are at stake. It's just common sense. And we can also save a lot of money by doing so, because the cost of an average cost of treatment for stage 1 breast cancer is $39,000 versus $370,000 for stage 4. So we can reduce the burden on the healthcare system. We can save lives. We can reduce suffering. Let's just do it.
Excellent. I think that's quite a timely finish. Thank you, Anita. On behalf of the committee, I would certainly like to extend my thanks for all of the witnesses being here today and providing their testimony. Indeed, your experiences and stories help shed light on a really difficult conversation, but it's extremely important. We did start at 4:34, so I have about 2 minutes that I just need to indulge with the committee for a minute. A proposed budget in the amount of $16,200 for the study on breast cancer. A screening was circulated to everyone yesterday for your consideration. Is it the will of the committee to adopt the budget? Okay. Other than that, is the committee in agreement to adjourn?